What's up everyone? I want to talk about some rumours I've heard on Marvel vs Capcom 4 possibly actually being a thing. Dorgy Arcade did a video on what his roster would be and how he feels the game should pan out in terms of roster size, new characters, stages. It's amazing. Check out Dorgy Arcade's video on Marvel vs Capcom 4, Build the Roster Part 1 and 2. In my case, what I want to talk about is how would certain characters play. And for this one, I'm talking mostly about Asura from Asura's Wrath. The game Asura's Wrath kind of is like what Marvel did with Thor and Norse mythology. It's kind of what Capcom's doing with Hinduism. They made Asura's Wrath. You play Asura, the god of Wrath, who is like a six-armed badass. Angrier he gets, the more powerful he gets, and it's ridiculous the stuff he does in the game. And it's unsurprising that nearly anyone who's played Asura's Wrath, they will know that they want him in a Marvel vs Capcom game. So for this video, it's kind of inspired by what would it be like if they were in Smash, but in this case, what if Asura was in Marvel? How would he play? First of all, Asura being such a powerful demigod, you'll notice in the game he can take a lot of ridiculous damage throughout the game. So I would say he'd have fairly above average health or high health. He'll do a lot of damage, be one of the sort of medium, faster characters due to his power. I think the biggest downside Asura would have is teleporting characters who are faster than him, or beam characters that can keep him away, because Asura's entire gameplay revolves around rush down Wrecker, getting in your face and hitting you hard. A lot of his moves will be unsafe on block, or they will be unsafe on whiff. Because if you watch the Asura's Wrath gameplay, a lot of times he will throw out a punch or an attack and you'll see him over swinging the attack. Even if he lands the hit, his body will still be spinning or still be talking after the punch. So you can imagine how bad it will be if Asura was blocked or if he missed his attack. But aside from that, he would be a pretty fun character to play. Combo wise, he would hit hard, causing a lot of hit stun, block stun, staggering the enemy, doing a lot of damage. I think he would be a pretty fun character to play as. From what we see in his game, it's pretty obvious what his basic attacks would look like. He'd have a lot of swinging punches that hit hard. He'd combo pretty well. I'd say his crouching attacks would look very similar to his standing attacks, except they're angled down and hit off the ground, because in his native game, if Asura knocks someone to the ground, he can still punch them about while they're on the floor, and then pick them up off the floor with one of his special attacks. His air attacks would look very similar to what they are in his game. He'd just be punching you a bunch in the air. However, I think it's the special moves that we are excited to see about. First off, he will have his spinning lariat attack that he does in the game, or his heavy spinning attack. For Marvel vs Capcom, I can imagine this version of it being, it has a bit of a startup and a bit of a recovery, but Asura will have complete invincibility during the attack, and a little bit of armor on startup at least, and he'll basically just knock anyone away from him. If they're in front of him, behind him, literally about to land on top of him, he'll knock them away from him, because that's how it works in the game. It's a sort of stop trying to rush me down, that's my job kind of thing. Asura will basically just smack anyone off him using this attack. It's going to be a pretty useful attack. Biggest downside is that it's hard to continue a combo after it because it knocks the opponent far away, and Asura would have to sort of chase them down. It's a good combo ender, also a good way just to get someone off you. It will have some problem against projectiles though. Asura's other attacks should be his dashing uppercut. In the Asura's Wrath game, you hold the circle button, he will basically rush towards the opponent and do an uppercut. In fact, Asura does a lot of uppercutting in his games. You'll see him do it in his quick time events, you'll see him do it in the cinematics. Basically, it's obvious that Asura should have some kind of rushing uppercut to represent this move. And it would be perfect for him to have it in the game as a way for him to set up air combos. I'd say the attack would have really good priority avoiding high attacks, but its weakness would be that he could be sweeped in the middle of it. Aside from that, he'd have the startup invincibility of most uppercut attacks you would get in a fighting game. Knocks the opponent into the air and Asura can air combo them. Speaking of the air, if you do a similar move in the air, Asura would do his diving punch. Again, holding circle in his games, whilst in midair he will do his diving punch, so he would have that dive punch in game. Using the dive punch he can bring an opponent down to the floor to a hard knockdown, or he can hit them OTG. So it's a good way for Asura to use his mobility, it's a good way for him to hit opponents off the ground. You know, just another way to get in and do his combos as usual. With Asura's movement, I'd say that he would definitely have a pretty good dash, but that would be about it. I don't think he would have a lot of like air dashing due to the fact Asura doesn't do that much in his game. aside from his diving punch, and the only time he really does his air dashes is when he's like free falling in some of his games, or if he's fighting in space and uses his mantra to boost him around. But for the most part, Asura doesn't typically have any maneuverability in the air in his game, so I wouldn't say he'd have any air dashes. But his diving punch definitely will make up for lack of air dashing to get in. One of the things Asura does a lot in his games, using his 6 arms, he would punch the opponent a lot. Very much like Chun-Li's lightning kick, E Honda's 100 hand slap, and Wolverine's Swiss cheese. I think Asura should have a move where you just simply mash a punch button or an attack button and he'll go ham on his opponent. We see him do this stuff to basically Chakravar in, we see him do it during his fight against Deus, does it against Akuma, I think at the end of his fight, and he also does it against Argus, so it makes sense for Asura to have this kind of move. And for anyone who is channeling anger whilst playing a video game, button mashing comes to it, so it would definitely fit someone who wants to play Asura. Button mash and you'll get his punching attack. Whilst playing Asura, if you hold a certain attack button, it can allow Asura to do a very powerful sort of mega punch, similar to what he does in the game when Asura just punches the opponent away when he's knocked them down. I feel like this is something he could have as a potential special move, maybe not. It's an idea. Asura also has the ability to shoot bolts of mantra. He shoots these really fast, and against weaker opponents and some ships, he can blast them to pieces quite easily. Stronger opponents seem to just tank it, like it bounces off them or they don't seem to be bothered by it. However, shooting his mantra blast actually allows Asura to gain meter faster. So I feel like this is something you can implement as Asura in Marvel vs. Capcom, maybe like a battery counter. So he shoots his mantra blast, he will maybe shoot 6 at a time. He will gain meter for each one he's successfully shot without being interrupted. Each time they hit, he will also gain meter, so it will make him a good battery character. The mantra blast will have a lot of knockback, but they'll do pretty much no damage, like maybe 1% of the character's health. And they'll have literally no hit stun, which will be contrasted with his other attacks. This is similar to how every boss character in Asura's Wrath does not seem to give a crap when he shoots them. They can just walk right through it, but he still gains meter, so it will be kind of a decent keepaway for Asura, a decent way for him to gain meter, but he's not doing a lot of damage with that. He could also do this blast in the air, with the 6 blasts coming in different angles, making it difficult to dodge, but since Asura can shoot in the air and on the ground, it makes sense for him to have this ability. In Asura's native game, he also has the ability to roll. Using the roll, it lets him dodge damage, it lets him close the gap between an enemy, or even just avoid harm. So it makes sense for Asura to have a command roll in Marvel vs. Capcom. This command roll gives him a lot of invincibility throughout it, but it doesn't do any damage. It allows him to go through the opponent or get away from the opponent. I personally feel like that the command roll should be followed up with a few more attacks. If he does a forward roll, he can follow up with a drop kick. Asura does this several times, such as rolling under a Taizan and drop kicking them from behind, or he could just drop kick them from the front. He does this to Akuma, and he also does this to Deus. So it makes sense for Asura to have this kind of move. Similar to Akuma's Demon Flip in Street Fighter V or Kami's Spinning Knuckle, no matter what side Asura ends up, the drop kick will always direct towards the opponent. If he's not close enough, he's not going to reach them and he's easily punished, but if he's close enough, it would be a very satisfying hit. When rolling backwards, Asura can do another kick, but instead of drop kicking, he will step forward and do a snap kick. He in fact does this in his game. When one of the Taizans try to body slam him, he has the option to dodge it. He will do so by rolling back, and then he'll step forward and kick the Taizan away. So I feel like him having a follow-up for his back roll being that front snap kick is perfect. On top of that, I think Asura should have 2 command grabs that comes out of his rolls. When rolling forward, Asura can cancel into a command grab that tackles the opponent to the floor, pins them down, and then punches the ever-living crap out of their face. He does this to Chakravartin, and he does this to Deus. It's one of the most satisfying things Asura does in his game, and he could end this by grabbing the opponent by the head, throwing them in the air, and punching them away. So basically what he does to Deus. I'd say when Asura rolls backwards and you do the command grab, he will launch himself into the opponent, jumping forward. If he catches the opponent by the face, which is what he does, he will drag them across the dirt and then fling them onto the wall, giving a wall bounce and an air combo opportunity. So I'm taking this idea from what he does to Wizen in the game. He grabs him by the face and, well, see for yourself. Another thing that Asura does a lot of is countering. You'll see him counter a lot of attacks, and I feel like this will be another way of Asura controlling the fight but it'd also feel very satisfying to nail one of these counters. If Asura is counting a low attack, he would grab the opponent by their leg and swing them around. But because one of those stretchy ones, I think the Kagebush as they're called, might do a sweeping kick, Asura can counter that by grabbing their legs and swinging them around. So I feel like Asura can counter low attacks by doing that. The opponent's body actually becomes a projectile, so if they call in an assist at the time, Asura can grab the opponent and throw them at the assist. Think of how Frank West hits the opponent with a zombie's body and throws it. Asura can do that. I think it would be a pretty cool idea, and it'd be a lot funnier when you end up hitting your opponent's character with another one of their own. I think it's perfect. Asura's mid counter would be his basic one that you see a lot in the game. Someone swinging a sword at him, catches the sword, punches them away. Someone about to stab him with a spear, catches that, punches them away. So a big gorilla Goma tries to punch him, catches their fist, punches them away. Argus running at him, grabs all his arms and then uppercuts him away. So pretty simple. I think if Asura is countering a mid attack, he will just grab the opponent, punch them in the air, and then air combo them. Easy. Finally, Asura will also have a high counter. So any time an opponent attacks Asura from the air, Asura will basically catch them, spin them around and uppercut them back into the air so he can air combo them. This is also based on another counter he has against the Titans. I feel like Asura's counters against the Titans are very creative, and I love this one in particular, so he should definitely have that. Asura also counters projectiles. The only ones I don't see him ever do in his game is beams, so beam projectiles would be his weakness, but regular fireballs or singular projectiles, Asura can counter them. Low would have him backhand them into the floor in front of him. Some of them would bounce, some would explode into the floor. The mid counter would have Asura catch the projectile and only throw it in front of him. It won't go up or down, regardless of which direction this projectile came from. And high would have Asura catch the energy ball and chuck it up into the air, similar to what he does to the rockets and grenades in the games. I feel like this would be useful against characters with simple projectiles such as rocket launchers from Nemesis or Hadokens from Ryu, but it won't be useful against gunfire or beam attacks, which will be a kind of a weakness for Asura, but I think it's a good way to balance them out. Another thing in fighting games that's important is grabs. So I thought about Asura having 4 different animations for his grabs. His forward grab would be basically grabbing the opponent by the head or the neck and then punching them away. He pretty much does this to Yasha in one of their fights, and he does similar attacks to a lot of other characters. Asura's backwards throw would have him grab the opponent by the neck, slam them behind him, and then stomp on their face or kick their head in some form of way. Basically what he does to Sergei when he's in his Wrath form. If Asura catches the opponent with an air grab, he has 2 different animations. His back one would have him flip them over and send them face first into the floor. What he does to Chakravartin over here, assuming Chakravartin does a teleport out of his grip, that is. And his forward air grab would be what he does to Evil Ryu. He grabs the opponent's arms and legs and brings them crashing down onto his knee, coccyx first. Looks painful, and it definitely fits Asura, and honestly I think a lot of fans would love to see Asura doing his attacks from the games. In regards to hyper combos, obviously Asura is going to have some crazy hyper combos. The first one would be his unlimited mode from the Asura's Wrath game. During state, Asura does more damage and has extra armor, so it makes sense for him to have this in Marvel vs. Capcom. It will definitely help Asura deal with certain characters, such as beam characters, or just getting in general, not just having to use his role. So during his unlimited mode, Asura could essentially use his super armor to walk through a beam attack, especially a super beam like a Shinku Hadouken. However, it will drain his unlimited mode quicker, but it will be useful for Asura to get in whilst using that armor because he cannot be interrupted. His attacks will also do more damage. A couple of other hyper combos that Asura could have could be based on his projectile ability. One of the things he does is jump in the air and shoot multiple mantra blasts at the opponent, and then fires one more that explodes. It would be interesting if he had a ground version. I'm pretty sure he's done something similar in the cinematics, where he will shoot in the air and then blast maybe one ball of mantra that explodes. It's a possible hyper combo that he could have, and it'll be a good way to just sort of blast the opponent and making it difficult for them to escape or avoid his attacks, unless they teleport behind him, which is going to be another problem for Asura, but he's not going to be overpowered and unfair to play against. if Asura had to have a cinematic level 3 hyper combo, I reckon it should start off with him lunging himself at the opponent. If he's successful, you get the cinematic of a first person point of view, where you look up at Asura as he punches the crap out of you, followed by one more punch. At this point you can mash buttons to do extra damage. Asura will punch the opponent in the face, but his fist will remain. Then the whole screen will become red, filled with his angry rage mantra energy, his wrath. And the longer it goes on for, it kind of goes red, red and red, until eventually it sort of punches you off his fist, and then you just explode with a beam of mantra energy. Think of it, what he does to Chakravarti in his final fight. I personally think that would be the perfect hyper combo for Asura. I personally think Marvel vs. Capcom should definitely consider Asura when they make the next game, and should definitely think about what his moveset should be. I personally like what I've come up with, but what do you guys think? Is there any moves that you think Asura should or shouldn't have? Special moves, hyper combos, grabs, just basic attacks? That's up to you, let me know. And also let me know what other characters that you think Marvel vs. Capcom should introduce. I can think of a few that are quite popular, such as Leon Scott Kennedy and probably Nightcrawler. So hit me up and who knows, maybe I'll make a video on that. What if they are in Marvel? Thank you for watching.